Hi there. Thank you for choosing Ho Chi Minh City Audio Trail, an audio-visual walking experience of the streets of Saigon's first Chinatown. I'm your guide, Matt, and I'm looking forward to guiding you around one of my favourite neighbourhoods of Ho Chi Minh City, Nguyen Thai Binh. The Nguyen Thai Binh neighbourhood has a very interesting history, friendly locals, and oodles of awesome food. Hey, did you know that this neighbourhood was actually Ho Chi Minh City's, Saigon's first Chinatown? Yep, it was. Okay, you're probably saying right now, but I thought Jolon was Saigon's Chinatown. Well, yes it is, these days, but you have to remember Jolon and Saigon used to be separate cities. Gotcha, pull that one out at your next pub quiz. Now, if you're interested in walking the streets of Jolon and stuffing yourself with all its amazing food and taking in all its interesting architecture, then I also have an audio walk for that too. Just go to thebureauasia.com to find it. Anyway, back to this walk. You'll get to learn more about Nguyen Thai Binh's cultural and historic sites, including locations perhaps not even known to other tourists, and maybe even people who call this city home. Did you know the neighbourhood was named after a young South Vietnamese anti-war activist who became a national hero? The story's fascinating, and you guessed it, I have a podcast on that too. Even for me, just about every time I venture out into this city, I learn or see something new, and I've been living here since 2010. It's almost impossible to keep up with. By the time you get back home to your country and begin telling your family and friends all about your trip to Vietnam, there's a good chance it will already be a little different. But best of all about this experience, at least for me anyway, and I hope for you too, is that I'll get to share with you some of my favourite places to eat. From banh mi to mi hoan tan to bun thit nung, Vietnam's own barbecue. Well, kind of. And I've done all the hard work tasting it for you, just so I can be sure that you'll like it. Hey, somebody has to do it. So what are we waiting for? Let's get into it. Wow, that was some kind of intro, wasn't it? Now, this walk has been designed for you to actually walk it. But if you're at home listening to this in some far-flung part of the universe, then that's cool too. I'll try to include you guys as much as possible, so I'm sure you'll get plenty out of this experience as well. Don't forget, I've left a brief description in the show notes explaining where you need to start this walk. So, as I said a moment ago, let's get into it. Okay, so right now you should be standing on Nguyen Hue Street, somewhere at the Saigon River end of the walking street in District 1. Now, in order for you to stay on the right path for my walk, I need you to find your way to the Bac Dang Wharf Park in District 1. In Vietnamese, it's called Com Vinh Ben Bac Dang. You'll find this park along the Saigon River at the end of Dom Coi Street, opposite the historic Majestic Hotel. If you stand facing the Saigon River at the end of Nguyen Hue Street, you need to start walking in the direction on your left-hand side, along Ton Duc Thang Street, that really busy street in front of you. Don't worry, you don't need to cross it. Yet. If you're not sure which way to go, try asking someone on the street. The locals are always happy to help. Or simply go to Google Maps and search for it. Search for Majestic Hotel Saigon and you should see it. But anyway, it's right nearby. Okay, I'll leave you for a moment so you can make your way to the Majestic Hotel on the corner of Dom Coi and Ton Duc Thang Streets. It shouldn't take you long. Talk to you in a minute. Hey, I'm back. So you should be standing on the corner of Dom Khoi and Ton Duc Thang streets in front of the Majestic Hotel. There's a pedestrian crossing here. Now's the time to use it. That's right, I need you to cross the street to the park by the river. I know, it's nerve-wracking. Even I don't like doing it after all these years. But just remember to look left first at the oncoming traffic. And once it's clear, enough, begin crossing the street. Don't run and don't change direction or step backwards. And raise your hand in the air and wave it so people are sure to see you. Once halfway across the street, look to your right for oncoming traffic in the other direction. And repeat. Good luck and see you on the other side. Okay, great. You've made it here in one piece, I hope. Did we lose anybody? Just kidding. Now stand with your back to the river, facing straight up Dom Khoi Street. How do you know it's Dom Khoi Street? Well, on the left-hand corner of the street, the Majestic Hotel should be right in front of you. That's where you just came from. And on the right-hand side of the street corner, you should be able to see Ru Nam Bistro. It might be a nice little place for you to chill after your walk. Okay, so look directly up Dom Khoi Street again. You should be able to see the two spires of Notre Dame Cathedral, approximately 500 metres away. They've been covered in scaffolding for years, and who knows when it will come down. Anyway, the cathedral was built between 1877 and 1879, and all of the building materials were imported from France, including the bricks. It's often erroneously reported, however, that it was the first church in Saigon. In fact, Notre Dame Cathedral replaced the Église Sainte-Marie Immaculée, which once stood where the current-day Sun Hua Tower is on Nguyen Thai Street, not too far from here. Directly in front of you is the historic Majestic Hotel, which was established in 1925 by a rich Chinese businessman by the name of Hui Bon Hua. At that time, it featured 4 stories and just 44 rooms. However, back in 2003, a new 8-story wing was added, bringing the total number of rooms in the hotel to 175. You may have heard of Graham Greene's novel, The Quiet American. Well, one of Greene's favourite watering holes was the rooftop bar at the Majestic Hotel. It was also a favourite of his character Fowler in the book, who would also come here for happy hour drinks and to relax and enjoy the cool wind coming off the Saigon River of a late afternoon. Though the Majestic Hotel has been remodelled several times over the years, it still has that rooftop bar with its excellent view of the river. So keep it in mind, because that might be somewhere to quench your thirst after this walk. Beyond the Majestic Hotel, up Dom Khoi Street, the tall glass building you can see is the Reverie, probably the most opulent hotel in Ho Chi Minh City today. By day, it looks nondescript, but by night, it puts on an impressive light show that can stop you in your tracks. And peering over the left-hand side of the Majestic Hotel is the 68-floor, 263-metre Batexco Tower, once the tallest building in Vietnam, but only for a short time. A few quirky things to note about the Batexco Tower is that 1. Its design was inspired by Vietnam's national flower, the lotus. 2. It's actually impossible to land a helicopter on the helipad due to its design and the wind currents on the 52nd floor. And 3. The site where it stands was once the location of the city's first major market. There's also a sky deck up there, which is worth checking out. The entrance and ticket office is easy to find at the bottom of the building. We'll walk nearby that later. And beer drinkers, you'll love this. There's a Heineken exhibit up there with free flow beers. But check opening hours. I'll leave a link in the show notes. The Texaco Tower was quickly surpassed by Landmark 72 in Hanoi and then Landmark 81 in Ho Chi Minh City. You can see it from here, right behind you. Take a moment to look around and perhaps even take a selfie for your Instagram page. But don't move far from this spot. A moment ago, I mentioned Landmark 81. In the foreground, you should be able to see the ferry terminal where ferries depart for the beaches of Vũng each day. And beyond the ferry terminal is, of course, Landmark 81, which is 81 stories and 461 metres high, making it the second tallest building in Southeast Asia and the 17th tallest building in the world. There's an observation deck up there spanning the 79th and 81st floors. So if you're feeling up for getting high, of a different kind that is, go and check it out when you get the chance. There's a link in the show notes. Just to the left of Landmark 81 is the controversial Ba Son shipyard project, which during the war was where naval ships docked. And in the foreground closer to us is the newly opened bridge to Tu Tiem, the largely undeveloped piece of land across the river. Then even closer again is Mê Linh Point, where you should be able to make out the statue of Chan Hung Dao. It might be a bit tricky to see from here, but Chan Hung Dao is one of the most revered figures in Vietnamese history from the 13th century and who, with his army, repelled multiple Mongol invasions. The park around the monument has recently been done up and is well worth a quick look. That location is also at the beginning of Hai Ba Chung Street. One of my other walks features that street, so please check that out if you have the time. And closer to us still are the Riverside and Renaissance hotels. Now looking across the river, you should be able to see Tu Tiem Church. By day, it looks unassuming, but at night, believe it or not, it looks like a club with fluorescent pink and blue lights. Maybe I'm missing something. Anyway, the Tu Tiem Congregation of the Lovers of the Holy Cross was established in 1840, and the church's construction got underway in 1859. In recent years, the church and congregation have been under threat of relocation due to the development and value of the land on which it sits. However, back in 2019, they were given heritage status and are now protected. Thank God, you might say. Oh, and another thing I'd like to share with you. A while back when I was the editor of a local English language magazine here, I did a story on that very church and was surprised to find out that the nuns had their very own dairy. I wonder if it's the world's most urban dairy farm. Holy cow! Let me know if you find the answer. Moving further around in a clockwise direction, you should be able to see an orange-coloured building in the distance. Can you see it? That's the Ho Chi Minh Museum, a shrine dedicated to the man this great city was named after, Ho Chi Minh. Later during the walk, you can take a look around inside. The entry fee is just 10 to 15,000 dong. That's about 50 US cents. Not much. Okay, so let's walk along the river in that direction now. Coming up on your right-hand side is Nguyen Thai Street with its walking zone cut off to traffic. It's where we met each other. It's 60 metres wide and runs from the French colonial-era People's Committee building, once known as the Hotel de Ville. From the top end, it's approximately 900 metres down to where we are now. The street started out as Kin Lon Canal, where Chinese vendors traded and transported goods to and from the city market. You can imagine how junks were unloaded here onto small boats to ferry goods back and forth. When the French came along in 1861, they renamed it China Canal and added a boulevard on either side. These days, it's hard to imagine as a waterway, isn't it? But you can still see how it would have worked. At this end of the street, basically where the Batexco Tower stands, was the city's first market. In 1914, the market was closed after a massive fire and relocated to where the Bentan market is today, approximately 1 kilometre from here. I'm sure you've heard of it, or perhaps even visited already. In 1887, the French filled in the canal to build a tramway connecting Saigon, Jolon and Mito in the Mekong Delta. In 1956, it was renamed Nguyen Thai Street after the 18th century emperor, one of the most successful military commanders in Vietnam's history. As we continue along in the direction of the Ho Chi Minh Museum, with the flags of the 10 ASEAN nations, across the street is the impressive Customs Department of Ho Chi Minh City. The building is one of the oldest in the city and was built in 1867 by a wealthy Cantonese businessman by the name of Nguyen Thai, and it became known as Maison Nguyen Thai or Hotel Nguyen Thai. It's easy to imagine, even today, why it was regarded as such an impressive property. I mean, look at the location. At one stage, Nguyen Thai held the monopoly on the opium trade in Cochin, China, until the French authorities, finally realising what they were missing out on in taxes, started getting in on the act of dealing drugs themselves around 1881. In a twist of irony, Nguyen Thai sold this building to the government in 1882, and in subsequent years it became the Directorate of Customs and Excise. For a time, the building was also a hotel and known as the Cosmopolitan Hotel and Cafe. If you get the chance, be sure to try and get a closer look at the facade. You might just see an opium poppy or two in the details. At the intersection of Ton Duc Tang and Ham Ni Streets, turn your back to the Saigon River and look up Ham Ni Street. In the 1800s, this street started out as a waterway. In fact, it was known as Rak Gao Sol, or Crocodile Bridge Creek. Can you guess why? If you guessed that there was a bridge and crocodiles that lived here, then you'd be right. It's said there used to be pools of water that lined the creek's banks, and inside those pools were crocodiles which were bred for meat. Hey, look out behind you. Sorry, didn't mean to startle you. But yes, that's a true story. And if you want to find out more, be sure to check out my video about it on my YouTube channel. Details in the show notes. Okay, so continue walking along the river. You should be able to see the signal mast ahead. That's the flagpole with the Vietnamese flag flying on top. The original mast was merely a flagpole and was used to communicate with vessels plying the river. At one point, the area, which had become known as Joker's Point, was a popular recreational spot during colonial times. Meanwhile, the small building at the foot of the flagpole became a bar in the 1920s, and by the 1940s, the signal mast had become a famous restaurant called Restaurant de la Pointe de Blagueur, or the Joker's Point Restaurant. I don't know why it became known as Joker's Point, but jokes were put aside on the 23rd of September 1945 when resistance forces and British Indian troops clashed when the British were helping the French return to power. If you take a moment to look at the garden you're standing in, you may notice that the design is in the form of the lotus, as is the design of the garden right along this waterfront. After this walk, why not get a better view of it from a rooftop bar at any of the hotels along here over a sneaky beer? Okay, take a moment to look around and feel free to take a look at the timeline of photos beneath the flagpole. Pause me here if you wish, and I'll catch up with you again soon. Okay, so there's a little bit of history for you. At this point, you should be standing at the mouth of the Ben Nye Canal, the canal that runs in and out of the Saigon River, with the Ho Chi Minh Museum on the opposite bank. By the way, right beneath you is the Tu Tim Tunnel that crosses beneath the Saigon River and connects District 1 with Tu Tim. As you can imagine, it carries a lot of traffic. And if your onward journey to the north involves a bus, car, or God help you, motorbike, then it's in this direction that you'll head. During the French colonial era, this canal was known as the Xinhua Creek, or the Chinese Creek. This was because the first Cantonese community was established along these banks, and it's where the Nguyen Thai Binh neighbourhood is located today. The canal makes its way to District 5 and beyond. Now continue along the pathway by the canal and keep the water on your left-hand side. Just ahead, you should see the Can Hoi Bridge with all the traffic on it. It links District 1 and District 4. Pass under the bridge, and when you come out the other side, you should be able to see a large grey building on your right. It's part of the State Bank of Vietnam and signals our entrance into the Nguyen Thai Binh neighbourhood. So I'll let you make your way towards that building. It should only take you 2 or 3 minutes. So now that you're here, wait for a safe moment to cross the street into Ho Tung Mao Street. Aim for the bank side of the street, where the security box is. In the distance, you should be able to see the Patexco Tower standing out. Okay, so cross the street. Be extra careful here. Take your time. Once across the street, make your way up Ho Tung Mao Street. This section of the street is quite short and comes to an intersection with Ham Ni Street. Stand on the corner opposite the blue building when you get there. It should take you about 2 minutes or so. Okay, so now that you're here, you should be standing opposite the blue building that these days is an international business and language school. But from 1952 until 1965, this is where the first US embassy was located. And yes, it was in this exact building. This location, however, has a traumatic past. It was at this very location on March 30, 1965, that the embassy was bombed. If you'd been standing here at that very time, chances are you wouldn't be here today. It's reported the attack occurred when a South Vietnamese policeman began arguing with the driver of a car parked outside the embassy, around about where you're standing now. But the driver refused to move the vehicle. Moments later, another man drove up alongside the car and fired at the policeman, killing him. The car parked outside the embassy, packed with almost 150 kilograms or 300 pounds of explosives, detonated, killing 19 Vietnamese, 2 Americans and 1 Filipino, and injuring another 183. One of the Americans was Barbara Robbins, the first ever female CIA agent killed during active duty. Following the bombing, a new US embassy was built on current-day Les One Street, where the embassy remains today. There's a fascinating story about the Viet Cong operatives who were behind the bombing, but I might leave that for another time and perhaps another walk. Now turn back in the direction from where you came. Take note of the large building before you, on the corner of Ho Tung Mao and Win Com Chu streets. This is known as the VAR building. I don't know what VAR means, but it doesn't matter for us. It was built in 1973, during the latter stages of the war. The building has been described as a prominent example of mid-20th century Vietnamese modernist architecture, designed by architect Le Van Lam, and represents the emergence of Vietnamese traits taking over traditional European styles of the time. This example features the double skin techniques found in Vietnamese modernist architecture. Le Van Lam also designed the headquarters of the Voice of Ho Chi Minh City broadcast station in the Dak Hau neighbourhood nearby, along with the beautiful Library of General Sciences building on Li Tu Chom Street, also not too far from here. I'm sure you agree with me that it's quite a stunning building, especially when viewed from a distance to appreciate its scale. Right, so now it's time to turn into Nguyen Thai Binh Street, the one heading to the right. This section of the street is largely unremarkable given the number of import-export businesses here and few places to eat or drink or of historical note. Although, about 50 to 100 metres from here is a small coffee shop on the left-hand side that's been open since 1987. It's simply called Café Dalat because the owners of this family-run business were originally from there and all those years ago decided that they wanted to bring their coffee from nearby Dak Lak in the Central Highlands, renowned for its coffee, to the punters of Ho Chi Minh City. Let's go and take a look. As you can see, there's nothing sexy about this place, unlike the many other cafes in the city, but it's just great to see that there are still small family-owned coffee shops around. And the coffee isn't too bad as well, especially for about 15 or 20,000 dom for a Café Soda. If you like, get one here or to go. If you decide to stop here and take a coffee break, pause me here until you're ready to go again. Okay, let's carry on and continue along Nguyen Thai Binh Street until the intersection of Nguyen Thai Binh and Ton That Dam streets. Turn left and walk about 50 metres or so along the street until you get to the apartment block called Chung Gu Ton That Dam at 14 Ton That Dam Street. I'll give you a moment to get there. It should only take you about a minute. Now that you've found the entrance, wander inside and take the stairs on the right-hand side. Can you see them? Apart from being an old residential apartment block from the French colonial era, it's also home to an eclectic collection of small cafes and boutique shops. And there's even a couple of small bars in here. You wouldn't know it, would you? That's the beauty of discovering Saigon on foot. Venture in and check out each floor, because it's an excellent example of an apartment complex that's rumoured to date back as far as the 1860s. Go on, go and wander around a bit, perhaps have a coffee or maybe something a little stronger. I'll be here waiting for you when you're done. Okay, so I'm sure you found that interesting. Did you have a drink? Tell me about your experience in the comments section of the landing page for this walk. Now let's retrace our steps back to the Nguyen Thai Binh intersection and turn left back into Nguyen Thai Binh Street. This will take you a couple of minutes. For now, keep the huge grey building on your left. This is the State Bank of Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh City branch. The building dates back to 1928, at a time when it was known as Banque de l'Indochine, and it was here that Indochina's first piastre currency note was issued on August 13, 1891. Designed by a French architect, its exterior is made from Binh Hoa granite. Binh Hoa is the capital of Dom Nai province, just 30 kilometres northeast of here. Anyone who's travelled to Cambodia or is familiar with the culture may notice that the decorative work all over the building, and especially around the edge of the roof, if you can see up that far, is inspired by Khmer art. Perhaps this is a nod to the origins of the city, which from around 1145 was called Premature, owing to it belonging to the Khmer Empire until around 1788. If you want to take a better look from across the street, go ahead. I'll wait for you at the intersection ahead. By now, you should be at the intersection of Nguyen Thai Binh and Pasteur Streets. Across the street, you should be able to see a GS25 convenience store. If you can, then you're on the right track. Cross Pasteur Street and go left and follow it down the street towards the canal. By now, you should be able to see the bridge at the end of the street, beyond the traffic roundabout. Stick to the right-hand side of the street here, as the State Bank security mightn't like you being on the other side. at the roundabout, cross at the zebra crossing, over to the bank side. Be careful here as traffic is erratic. Now cross the street at the zebra crossing that leads to the small park and the bridge going over the canal. Remember to look left first, and when halfway across, look right and be careful. Some traffic may go around the roundabout, while some will come straight in your direction. Now, why have I risked your life to get you to the other side? Good question. Let me tell you about it as we walk over it to the other side. The bridge you're now at is called Cầu Mom, or in English, it's often referred to as the Rainbow Bridge. In Vietnamese, Cầu means bridge, and as for Mom, well, there's some conjecture over its exact definition, it seems. Cầu Vom means rainbow in Vietnamese, so perhaps there's some kind of wordplay going on there. I also read somewhere that people think it looks like a rainbow. What do you think? Anyway, let's chat about what we do know. The bridge was completed in 1894 by a French engineering company with ties to Gustave Eiffel. He has no claim on this bridge. However, his own company was well known for constructing canal bridges across the Mekong Delta around the same time. These days, it's more popular as a spot for selfies in the evening, but as you can see, the area and bridge have seen better days. And as for the canal, presumably once a thriving waterway plied by junks ferrying goods back and forth along it, is these days sadly polluted. Although there are piecemeal efforts being made to improve the situation, such as the flood mitigation works going on beside the bridge, this has been going on for years with no end in sight. Nevertheless, the bridge here still serves its original purpose of connecting District 1 and District 4. Originally, I believe it was built for vehicles, but as you can see, these days it's for pedestrians only. If you make your way to the highest point of the bridge and turn around and face the direction in which you came, it will perhaps give you a better sense of how this bridge must have been important for commerce at one stage. After marvelling at all of Saigon's glory, let's visit the Ho Chi Minh Museum. By now, you should be just about across the bridge. If you are, you're now in District 4. Go down the steps to your left. Be careful on these steps. They have varying heights and I've almost taken a tumble a few times here. Follow the pathway along the canal to the Ho Chi Minh Museum. I'll be back in just a moment to tell you a little more about this area. So you've probably already noticed some people fishing up ahead. Who knows why anyone would want to fish here, but hey, it's not a bad spot in the shade, and I guess it's something to do. The path continues for a couple of 100 metres or so. The pontoon along here is from which river tours can be taken, but last time I checked, there didn't seem to be many tours happening, and at that time, there wasn't a timetable or website address to check. Perhaps you might have more luck than me finding out. Continue up to the Can Hoi Bridge ahead, pass under it, and follow the path to the right. Once you pass under the bridge and veer right, you'll see the museum parking on your left, and not much further ahead, you'll pass the museum souvenir shop, and then just inside the gate next to it is the ticket office of the Ho Chi Minh Museum. Tickets are 10,000 dong each for adults. Just in case you're wondering what the large structure up ahead is as you approach the museum, it's a war-era water tower. A number of towers like this one were built between 1965 and 1969 by the Americans around the city. Ironically, however, they were never put into use. Anyway, this is where I'll leave you to take a look at the museum and to enjoy the views of the city from a different perspective. Pause me here at the front gate and I'll talk to you soon. Have fun. Hey, welcome back. Let's begin making our way back to the Rainbow Bridge along the river, the way we came to get here. It should take around 4 to 5 minutes. So, how was the museum? I trust you learnt something, or at the very least, got a kick out of all the old dioramas and displays. And don't forget, the building is one of the oldest remaining from the French colonial period and was completed in 1863. And it's still often referred to as Nha Rong. Nha means house in Vietnamese and Rom means dragon. I'm not sure if you noticed, but on the roof of the museum there's a dragon at each end. You may or may not already know this, but this location is the original port of Saigon and was known as Dragon Wharf. Until just a few years ago, the Saigon port was still along here, but it's since been relocated. Although many of the dinner cruise boats still depart nearby. So there you go. Oh, and one more thing. The street the Ho Chi Minh Museum is on is called Nguyen Thai Binh Street. Any idea why? Did you come across that name in the museum? Well, it's from here, where a young Nguyen Thai Binh, who we now know as Ho Chi Minh, boarded a French ship to undertake what would become a 30-year odyssey around the world to win his country back for its people. So it's a pretty iconic spot, although you'd never really know it. So I don't know about you, but usually when I get to this stage of the walk, I'm beginning to think about what I'm going to have to eat. Keep in mind that if you're doing this walk in the afternoon, there's a good chance most street food vendors will have already long sold out and will probably be taking a well-earned siesta until they fire up again in the evening. But if you're doing this walk leading up to lunchtime in the morning, then you're in luck. There should be plenty on offer, so let's go looking for some street food. While we're making our way back to the GS25 convenience store on the corner of Nguyen Thai Binh and Pasteur Streets again, I'd like to tell you a little bit more about the history of the Nguyen Thai Binh neighbourhood. As I mentioned at the beginning of this walk, the Nguyen Thai Binh neighbourhood was really the city's first Chinatown, for want of a better description. During the French colonial period, the canal you're crossing or about to cross was called the Chinese Creek, because of the Cantonese settlement between the creek and current-day Ham Ni Street nearby. In fact, Cantonese also settled in the area of what is today Saigon's oldest wet market, Jo Ton Tat Dam. Also, not too far from here, and just across Ham Ni Street, which incidentally, at one stage, was called Rue des Cantons. If you haven't already, I recommend you check the market out. There's still plenty of evidence there of the Cantonese community, including one of Saigon's oldest noodle carts and a community building with Chinese language characters on its facade. I'll leave directions in the show notes. I'm told the Cantonese community around here goes as far back as 1860, when the French encouraged immigration from China's Guangdong province to help develop the economy. And obviously, this is where they set up shop. Of course, the city wasn't the metropolis it is today. These days, Cantonese is still widely spoken on the streets in this neighbourhood. Not that I would know. I'm still trying to get my head around the local language after all these years. But even if you don't speak Cantonese, it's easy for anyone to tell from the signage on many of the shop fronts. You may even be able to spot some written in Vietnamese, Chinese and English. Now where were we again? Ah yeah, food. Get yourself to the intersection of Nguyen Thai Binh and Pasteur Streets again. Remember? The one with the GS25 convenience store on the corner, and we'll take it from there. Hi there again. I'm glad you made it in one piece, especially for what's coming up. It's time to try a few things to eat, so listen along to hear the options available along this stretch before you make your decision. At the convenience store, begin walking along Nguyen Thai Binh Street in a southwesterly direction away from the State Bank. Just 50 metres or so from the convenience store on the opposite side of the street is Hem 100 Nguyen Thai Binh Street. Usually the Hem name and number is displayed on a sign overhead. Hem means alleyway in Vietnamese, so cross the street and enter the Hem, and see if there's any food in there that catches your fancy. Near the entrance is usually an enthusiastic chap and his family who serve up the likes of bún bò Huế, a spicy and earthy beef rice noodle soup that originates from Huế in central Vietnam, but could quite easily be mistaken as Saigon's own dish, given how popular it is down here these days. In a bowl of this good stuff, expect to find a rich combo of flavours thanks to lemongrass, beef, fermented shrimp paste, pork knuckles, chilli, coriander, basil, mint, banana blossom, and everybody's favourite, a block of congealed pig's blood. Go on, pull up a seat and give it a go. Expect to pay 30,000 dom, just a couple of dollars with a drink. If that's not turning you on, then further down at the end of the alley are a couple of small mum and pop shops, one in particular called Com Chua Van Phung, or Chi Phung. Chi Phung specialises in the ubiquitous cheap lunchtime staple, Gom Bin Yen. Saigon is packed with these places, feeding millions of hungry workers each day. Chi Phung's is a small version though, but still serves up a good selection of the regular options with rice, which typically includes an assortment of steamed and pickled vegetables, meats, including some of the mysterious kind, fried egg, tofu, fish, in fact, a ton of stuff. Think of it as a kind of bubble and squeak buffet. Just point at what you want and Chi Phung will heap it onto your plate. And it's cheap. That's part of its appeal. But don't eat too much if you decide to give it a try, because just 15 metres or so back outside the alley on the street is a banh mi stall at 108 Nguyen Thai Binh Street. Open every day except Sunday, Miss Lin does wicked roast pork and duck banh mi for the ridiculously crazy price of 20,000 dom. That's just $1. Recently when I ate there, I told Miss Lin she could easily double the price and I'd still buy it. But she says local workers wouldn't at that price, so she keeps it at 20,000 dom. Naturally, I didn't complain. Pull up a small stool by Miss Lin's trolley. She speaks English quite well, and like most of these hardworking ladies, is up for a chat. Don't linger for too long though, because just along a bit, at 114 Nguyen Thai Binh Street is another precious little find. Bún Chả Hanoi has been open since around the late 90s, and here they specialise in fried crab spring rolls. Ask for Nem Run Gourmet. Roll them up in the herbs and lettuce leaves, dunk them in the Nuc Jam, the dipping sauce, and away you go. For around 40 to 50,000 dom, these are some of the best value springies I've had in Saigon. In other locations, I've spent at least double, even more on these things. While you're here, you might want to try their other specialties like soup made with shrimp from Westlake in Hanoi. Ask for Ban Tom Ho Tay, and also give their eel with crispy fried noodles a try. Okay, I'll leave you to decide. Talk to you soon. So how was that? What did you think? Hit the spot? Make sure you let me know after the walk by commenting in the comments section on the landing page. Now with our bellies full, let's soldier on along Nguyen Thai Binh Street. Remember, if you need a drink, try one of the vendors along the street here. And as for ice, I've never had a problem with it. Typically, any stomach issues will come with food handling and freshness. My rule of thumb is generally to eat where it's popular, which means there's a high turnover of food and that it must be good. Also, I look for anywhere that has plenty of flame. Where there's smoke, there's fire, they say, and in this case, that's a good thing. Oh, if you need a toilet break, there's one coming up, so just hold on for a moment. Okay, where were we? Yes, walking along Nguyen Thai Binh Street. Continue ahead and wait at the intersection of Nguyen Thai Binh and Nam Ki Khoi Nye streets. So here we are at this rather nondescript looking intersection, which looks like any other intersection around town. However, it's said that at this spot, sometime in the middle of last century, a young delinquent by the name of Le Van Dai would spend his days shining shoes and selling newspapers here just to make ends meet after his father, a revolutionary against the French, died while incarcerated in prison on the infamous Con Son Island, Vietnam's own Devil's Island of Papillon fame, around about 250 kilometres south of here. It's where the French and later the Americans sent political dissidents to serve long prison sentences, with many of them never making it out alive. Long story short, young Dai excelled as a student at the School of Hard Knocks. So good was he, in fact, it's rumoured he never lost a fight on his own turf here on this corner, and went on to earn the nickname Dai Cathay of Nguyen Thai Binh Street, after the Cathay Theatre that once stood nearby. By the early 1960s, at the age of 20, he'd earned a reputation as one of Saigon's most fearsome gangsters in the city, having gained control of most of the brothels, drug dens and nightclubs in this neighbourhood and throughout Districts 1 and 3. In later years, he would become one of what was known as the four great kings of Saigon's underworld. At the age of 26, Dai Cathay was arrested for masterminding the murder of an underling of a South Vietnamese general and chief of police, and then placed in prison on the island of Phu Quoc, another notorious island prison approximately 400 kilometres southwest of Saigon. A couple of months later, he escaped after organising the bribery of prison guards to look the other way. Intriguingly, he was never found again, and to this day, mystery surrounds his disappearance and probable death, while popular theories that attempt to explain what happened have never been proven or debunked. For all we know, he could still be alive. Okay, all this gangster talk has made me thirsty, so about 50 metres from the intersection of Nguyen Thai Binh and Nam Ki Khoi Nye streets, look for a narrow entranceway into a small alley and courtyard at 158 Nguyen Thai Binh on the right-hand side. Go through the entrance past the vendors and into the courtyard. There are a number of small establishments in there, but the one you're looking for is Biker Shield Bistro. It'll be on your right-hand side in the courtyard. Biker Shield is an impressive bistro and motorcycle accessories store over 2 floors in a French colonial era, refurbished Chinese-style shophouse. On display are some impressive vintage motorcycles, plus a war-era truck that's been converted into a bar. Let's pop in here for a cool drink, toilet break, and a rest in air-conditioned comfort. And I'll rejoin you after your break. Hey there, welcome back. How cool is Biker Shield? Lin, the owner, is a good friend of mine, and he told me once that his love for motorbikes stems from childhood in Hanoi during the Cold War. Back then, his father used to plonk him on the petrol tank of his rare Russian-made Ural and take him to work at Noi Bai Airport. That's one of many interesting stories Lin tells of the time when Vietnam was closed to the world. Now, head back out onto Nguyen Thai Binh Street and continue in the direction we were heading before going to Biker Shield. Across the street is the Ho Chi Minh City Stock Exchange, which should be on your left-hand side by now. Seeing I keep mentioning his name, it might be a good idea now to tell you a little bit about who this street was named after. Nguyen Thai Binh was also known as Hy Văn, and he was a Vietnamese poet and scholar who lived from 1778 to 1858. At one stage, he was a military general, but it wasn't until the age of 42 that he reached acclaim through his poetry for the Vietnamese people. Nguyen Thai Binh was born into a poor family in Thai Binh, some 100 kilometres or so southeast of Hanoi. It's believed that he wrote over 1,000 poems, but the majority are missing, with approximately just 150 remaining today. Nguyen Thai Binh works are noted for their expression of individualism, freedom, and independence. He dedicated his life to his country and the welfare of its citizens, and when the French invaded Vietnam in 1858, he was moved to proclaim, "Should I be at my last gasp, I will fight tooth and nail for the country's freedom and independence." Wow, there's some stirring words if I've ever heard them. By now, we should be approaching or even standing at the intersection of Pho Duc Dinh and Nguyen Thai Binh streets. Diagonally across the street, you should be able to see Cantonese Cafe on the corner, one of the many branches of the large coffee shop chain that have sprouted up over the past few years. Try it out if you like, but you're not going to get the traditional coffee drinking experience in a cafe or on the street that you've heard all about, especially at a joint that aims to appeal to Gen Z, a generation hooked on social media and eyes glued to smartphones. You can probably spot some sitting there now. Cross the intersection and continue along Nguyen Thai Binh Street. If you remain on the opposite side of the street to Cantonese Cafe, you'll perhaps get a better look at the Chinese-style shophouses along the way. Whenever I look at them, I get this rush of romantic thoughts that I'd like to live in one, renovated of course, and secure, but when the rainy season kicks in, it washes away those thoughts pretty quickly. Along here a little bit is an organic store in a premises that spans across at least 3 of these shophouses, and which gives you an idea of the direction things are heading in terms of consumer behaviour in Ho Chi Minh City and across Vietnam. From here, you should be able to see the intersection of Nguyen Thai Binh and Calmet streets. That's not a Vietnamese name, you're probably thinking. Well, you're right. Calmet Street is one of the few remaining streets in Ho Chi Minh City with a foreign name. The other one on this walk you may recall is Pasteur Street. Calmet Street is named after Albert Calmet, a French physician of the 19th and 20th centuries, who's credited with being the co-creator of the tuberculosis vaccine. While in Saigon, he produced an amount of smallpox and rabies vaccines to satisfy the needs of the population. And he also developed the first antivenom for snake bites called Calmette's serum, of which much of his research and trials were conducted in Saigon at the Pasteur Institute, which he was charged by Louis Pasteur himself to found and direct in 1891, which, to this day, is still located not too far from here in District 3. You may remember that we briefly walked along Pasteur Street earlier, and yes, the street is named after him. But while Pasteur never lived here, Calmette and Alexander Yersin, who I'll talk about soon, made Vietnam home for long periods of their lives. Oh, and probably Calmette's most important achievement, in my opinion, is that he helped develop the process of converting starch into sugars that's used during the beer brewing process. Right, that's it. I'm starting a beer label called Calmette's Craft. I guess I'd better copyright it. So right about now, we should be at the intersection of Nguyen Thai Binh and Ki Kon streets. Instead of crossing Ki Kon and continuing along Nguyen Thai Binh, stand at the intersection, look diagonally across and up a little at the building on the corner. Can you see it? On the top of the building it reads École Yat-sen. Naturally, école is school in French. Yat-sen refers to Sun Yat-sen, considered one of the greatest leaders of modern China, who lived between 1866 and 1925. Therefore, this was the Yat-sen School of Saigon. I have to admit, I don't know much about the school, nor Sun Yat-sen, but allegedly the school was built in 1940 and was a primary school, which makes sense given the Cantonese community residing in the neighbourhood. Apparently, Sun Yat-sen often visited his supporters in Vietnam and became a well-known figure here. But that's about all I know. I guess I should read up and I'll let you know next time. Anyway, I just thought it was interesting and that you'd like it. Vietnam has been influenced by so many outside forces over the centuries, and this is another example. Let's go left onto Ki Kon Street here. There's something I want to show you just quickly. Be careful, this intersection tends to always be busy. Just steps from the corner on Ki Kon Street is a tasty Chinese egg noodle joint called Mi Ka Ki Kon at 70 Ki Kon Street. They're typically open from 6 a.m. each morning, sometimes closed on Mondays, and stay open till around lunchtime. Give it a try if you like, or note it down so you can sneak back tomorrow. Here they specialise in noodle soup with fish, typically snakehead fish, which is common in this part of the world. Don't worry, it's got nothing to do with snakes. The bowl of noodles is cheap, tasty and made on site, and has a gentle flavour, good for people who wish to ease into Vietnamese breakfasts before tackling the more bold flavours of other noodle soups in Vietnam. Okay, I just wanted to show you that. Oh, and there's a similar one directly across the street called Ha Ki, so give that a go too if you want, especially if you find it busy here. Now, let's head back to the intersection, continue along Nguyen Thai Binh Street in our original direction. Just 50 metres or so from here, you'll come across Phung Son Pagoda on the right-hand side of the street. This Buddhist pagoda was built after World War II and holds similar architectural characteristics as the more famous Tin Hau Pagoda in District 5, but it's significantly smaller. Nevertheless, size doesn't matter, does it? Because it's a beautiful example of the kind of pagodas you can find all over Saigon. Yet, this one is easily accessible and has fewer tourists to photobomb your selfies. Sit down, relax and catch your breath, but don't breathe in too much of the incense. Pause me here and take a look around for a bit, and I'll join you again soon once you're done. So what did you think of that? There are temples and pagodas at just about every turn in Vietnam, and no doubt you'll visit quite a few of them while you're here. Hopefully this one stacks up. If you're interested in delving a little further into Buddhism and religion in Vietnam, a fun read I recommend is Australian author Walter Mason's Destination Saigon. He offers a hilarious insight into 21st century Vietnam, with anecdotes about his many trips to Vietnam since the 90s. As someone who's lived here for a long time myself, I've found it so on point, and it made me laugh out loud on many occasions. Okay, so turn right outside the pagoda gates and continue walking along Nguyen Thai Binh Street. Very soon, on your right-hand side, you'll come across an entrance to Yersin Market, or in Vietnamese, Jo Yansin. This market is one of the most unusual markets in the city, and named after another physician of the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Alexander Yersin, who's remembered for co-discovering the bacteria responsible for the bubonic plague, and who has a strong connection with Vietnam, which I'll tell you a little more about coming up. You'll have time to poke around in the market soon, but first, let's visit another market and a way of life that I think you'll find interesting. Turn left into Yersin Street and walk about 100 metres down the street towards the main highway. You should be able to see traffic up ahead. On the right-hand side, look for a Hieu Tiu noodle shop called Tan Hung. It's quite big and should be easy to make out. Either side of the noodle shop are narrow entrances to alleyways barely wide enough for two people to pass by each other. Wander in and take a look. This is one part of Jo Go Ong Lan, or Go Ong Lan Market. Inside you'll come across families who live in tiny dwellings in super cramped spaces and who sell things from sugar, spices, herbal medicine and all kinds of knickknacks. Don't be afraid to enter. Despite it being a bit dark, the community here is very friendly and don't mind you peering in on their life for a moment. But as goes for anywhere, if you want to film or take photos, be sure to ask their permission first. Walk through the alleyway until you get to the end, turn left and walk along a little bit to the entrance of the next alleyway. Enter and return to Yersin Street that way. This might take you 15 minutes or so, depending on whether you get caught up in small talk with the locals inside, or if you're lucky, like I was recently, get an offer to eat lunch with them. If you do get offered to eat something, by all means try it, but don't eat too much, because I'm about to lead you to a tasty, lesser-known spot, a kind of barbecue meat and noodles joint just nearby. Pause me and enjoy the wander through the market and the cosy alleyways, and I'll join you back here on Yersin Street soon. And back out into the real world. How was that, hey? It's one of my favourite sections of this walk, and the whole time leading up to it, I was getting more and more excited about how you'd react. So make sure you let me know what you thought of it after this walk. Okay, before we retrace our steps back to Yersin Market, I just want to show you this tasty little joint around the corner on Vo Van Kiet Street, the busy street by the canal. On exiting the alleyway, turn right. Vo Van Kiet Street is a short walk from here. Then turn right again. At number 67 Vo Van Kiet, not far from the corner, there's a great little Nem Nung or Bun Tit Nung joint called One Nem Nung An Tan. If you're not sure where it is, just look for the smoke billowing out onto the footpath. Usually the young lad is there cooking up a storm of barbecue meats including bacon and small kebab-like pork sticks that get cut into bite-sized pieces and served up with a plate of lettuce and herbs and a bowl of white rice noodles with dipping sauce. As usual, don't expect to pay much, something like 50 or 60,000 dong with a drink. Even if you're feeling only remotely hungry, give this little spot a go. It's super popular with the locals and it comes recommended by the ladies in the alleyways you just visited. And I have to say, they're bang on with their recommendation. The downside is that its opening hours are unpredictable. Please don't blame me if they're closed. Anyway, whether or not you decide to eat here, our next destination is Yersin Market. Retrace your steps back around the corner into Yersin Street and head back to the intersection with Win Kum Chu Street where Yersin Market is on the corner. In the meantime, let me tell you about Alexander Yersin, after who the market was named. Yersin was born in Switzerland but in later years gained French citizenship. In 1890, he left France for what was then known as French Indochina, which of course today is Vietnam, Cambodia and Laos. After a number of years working in the region, including in Hong Kong, with a trip back home to France here and there, it was around 1894 that Yersin co-discovered the pathogen that causes the bubonic plague. He was certainly an interesting fella. In 1896, he returned here and for whatever reason installed a small laboratory to manufacture his plague serum in Nha Trang, around about 430 kilometres from here on the coast. Perhaps he was a surfer too. His lab became a branch of the Pasteur Institute, which is still right opposite the beach today on Chan Phu Street. But not only that, Yersin was a bit of a green thumb, you see, and was a pioneer in the importation and cultivation of rubber trees from Brazil to Vietnam and the rest of Indochina. Rubber trees are still prevalent in Vietnam today. Also, he attempted to acclimatise the quinine tree from the Andes in South America and from which the first known effective remedy for malaria was produced. You may also know that quinine is a flavour component of tonic water. Can you see where this is leading? Tonic water was initially marketed as a means of delivering quinine to people as a way of offering protection against malaria. And to make it more palatable, because it was bitter, British colonials in India mixed it with, you guessed it, gin, thus creating the good old G&T. I'm not sure how Yersin went with getting his quinine plants to grow in this climate and how many bottles of gin he went through in the process, but he stuck around in Nha Trang, eventually passing away there in 1943 at the age of 79. His grave in Nha Trang is recognised as a national monument. So when you're done with this walk, make sure you have a gin and tonic in Yersin's honour at one of the hotels overlooking the Saigon River. How good's that? Now, hit the market named in his honour. Inside you'll find pokey walkways overflowing with the latest construction tools and equipment, but that's not what you're in here to see. This market stocks an eye-opening range of mostly fake Vietnam War memorabilia stacked high and wide, from dog tags to Zippo lighters to camouflaged everything to oddball so-called Russian antiquities. You've got to see it to believe it. So I'll leave you here until you can finally extract yourself from the dogged vendors inside, hoping you'll part with your hard-earned money in exchange for a Viet Cong flag. Okay, at ease, soldier. So that was Yersin Market. Did you pick up a bargain? While you were in there, I remembered that I'd forgotten to mention that Alexander Yersin is also credited with founding the site for Dalat in 1893. Of course, Dalat has gone on to become one of the most popular escapes for Saigoners during the hotter months, because it's located up in the hills of the Central Highlands, about 300 kilometres northeast of here. And these days, Dalat has also become synonymous with coffee and organic produce. Hopefully you'll get a chance to visit while you're here in Vietnam. Okay, so let's continue our walk along Yersin Street, back towards the city. We're looking for Nguyen Thai Binh Street. So as you exit the Yersin Street gate of the market, turn right and walk about 100 metres. Nguyen Thai Binh Street should be on your right. Now we're moving into the final stages of our walk, but I've still got a few more things to show you. But first, I'll let you get to Nguyen Thai Binh Street. Okay, so now that you're in Nguyen Thai Binh Street, keep to the left-hand side along here. If there's too much stuff on the footpath, like motorbikes and tools for sale at the hardware and electrical stores along here, walk on the edge of the street. But of course, keep an eye on the traffic. About 2.5 blocks from here, you'll find a refreshing oasis from the noise and heat, where you can freshen up in aircon and take a bathroom break. But the highlight will be that you can try egg coffee. Yes, egg and coffee. You heard right. But more on that in a sec. Let's get you heading in the right direction first. You need to cross Ki Kon Street up ahead. It should be at the next intersection, and continue walking towards Calmet Street, which is still a couple of blocks from here. A moment ago, I mentioned egg coffee. In Vietnamese, it's called cà phê chung. I know it sounds like an unusual combination, but trust me, it works. It really does. Egg coffee is typically made with egg yolks, sugar and coffee, but there are variations, including exchanging the sugar with honey to even adding a shot of rum for an extra kick. Egg coffee is said to have originated in Hanoi and has its roots at the famous cà phê yang. The use of eggs as a replacement for milk came about because of the scarcity of cow's milk during the French-controlled 1940s. By now, you should be getting closer to the intersection with Calmet Street. Therefore, on the left-hand side nearby, you should be able to see the extremely popular pho joint called Phu Vung, the one with the white tiles and bright lights. It's open until 9 p.m, so it might be something you'd like to try today or this evening. Okay, cross the Calmet Street intersection and continue along Nguyen Thai Binh Street. On the left-hand side, we're looking for Hem 68, a very narrow alleyway that's easy to miss. On the corner here, you should be able to see a bon air joint, kind of like a walk-in cafeteria, a common sight around Saigon. Basically, bon air is Vietnam's version of steak and eggs often eaten for breakfast. It's tasty, but your cardiologist might have a heart attack if they hear you've had one of these. Still, what's a holiday without cheating every once in a while? Give it a try for brekkie tomorrow morning if you're still in town. Okay, so keep your eyes peeled for a small faded sign that says An House Cafe and Craft Beer. It's written in green and white letters. The alleyway entrance is a type of gate above which there are Chinese characters. About 20 or 30 metres inside the alley, you'll find An House on the left-hand side. Often there's a light blue Vespa parked out front. An House is a small cafe owned and operated by Mr. An and his business partners and family, who have all, at some stage, been active in Vietnam's tourism industry as guides and consultants. The cafe is also tastefully decorated with craft work from Indigenous communities of the Central Highlands and Sapa in the northern region of the country. Hop in and try their egg coffee. There's also local craft beer there to wash it down with. Okay, I'll leave you with your egg coffee experience and meet you back out on Nguyen Thai Binh Street when you're done. Pause me here and I'll talk to you soon. So what did you think? It's amazing how the combination works so well together, but you've probably got a bunch of caffeine and sugar coursing through your veins now, so let's put it to good use. Turn left out of the alley and continue along Nguyen Thai Binh Street until just before the intersection with Pho Duc Chin Street. On the left-hand side, somewhere between the food and other vendors, is an entrance gate to the Ho Chi Minh City Museum of Fine Arts. A highlight of a visit here is that it's set across 3 captivating colonial-era mansions built in the late 1920s and early 30s by one of the city's wealthiest families of the time that actually used to live in it. And for those who delight in the supernatural, you might also get a kick out of the urban legend that the building is haunted. I'll let you find that out for yourself. If you're interested in taking a look throughout these amazing buildings, you'll find the ticket office by the entrance on Pho Duc Chin Street. Walk through the museum grounds, past the sleepy-looking guard on the left and the coffee shop on the right. Straight ahead, just inside the main gate, you should be able to see the ticket office. Tickets are cheap and it's well worth a quick look around. I'll meet you outside the main gate on Pho Duc Chin Street when you're done. Pause me here and I'll talk to you again soon. I hope you enjoyed that. It really is a pretty special property, especially given how much of Saigon's architecture of that period is disappearing. Okay, so let's exit the property by the gate near the ticket office I just mentioned and turn left. cross the street before you get to the next intersection about 50 metres away, where you turn right into Le Comque Street, often referred to as Antique Street. This street is regarded as one of the oldest in Saigon, and for a long time, the go-to place for people hoping to stumble upon valuable antiquities or unearth pieces of treasure from ancient shipwrecks at the bottom of the East Sea. Mostly what you will discover, however, is bric-a-brac. Still, it's worth the short 200-metre walk, if only to capture a sense of what Saigon was like in the middle of last century, and before increasing development in the street and surrounds swallows it up sometime soon. I'll leave you here to snoop around and join you again at the end of the street, where it rejoins Nguyen Thai Binh Street. Happy hunting! So, how was your Antiques Roadshow? Fill your pockets with gold? As you may have noticed, the street is undergoing a transformation, with quite a large eatery along here, a bar, and even a high-end tailor. It appears the writing is on the wall for this street. Let's just hope that changes in the future take into account the street's history and its shophouse architecture. It really is a cool little street, and probably one of the shortest in the city. Now, I can almost taste that well-earned drink. Not far to go now. Don't worry, the aches and pains you might be feeling will be numbed by that G&T at the end of it, if you choose to go down that pathway. Leave Antique Street and rejoin Nguyen Thai Binh Street. Turn left, and barely 50 metres from here, the street runs into Nam Ki Khoi Nye Street up ahead. Be careful here, as the street carries a lot of traffic. In fact, it's one of the streets that connects to the airport and is used as one of the main thoroughfares to travel from the north to the south of the city. So take your time crossing here, as best as possible, and join Ham Ni Street, on which you need to head in the direction of the Saigon River. Can you see it down there? It might be a bit difficult from here, but it's about 500 to 600 metres away, about 4 blocks. Just a 6-minute walk from here is the end of our walk. I mentioned at the beginning of the walk that Ham Ni Street has an interesting history. There's a lot that can be said about it, but perhaps one of the more interesting things is that it was where Saigon's first railway line was built. That's why it's so wide. And for quite a time, trams operated along here too. In fact, behind you, just up the street in the direction of Ben Thanh Market, was the city's first railway station. These days, it's a bus terminal. Later on, the station was moved closer to Ben Thanh Market and then finally to where it is today in District 3. But that's a story for another time. To Ho Chi Minh Street, the intersection where the first US embassy was, cross Ham Ni Street to the other side. Be careful here because the traffic can get a bit crazy, especially with the public buses. You need to be walking in the direction of Batexco Tower. Once across the street, you should be standing in front of New Lan Bakery, one of my favourite places in town. It's a good spot for a snack, and you can probably already see what's on offer. Try some of the crispy pork here in a banh mi. But before you do, it's here where I bid farewell. I want to thank you for choosing to do this walk with me. It's been epic. Don't forget to let me know how you enjoyed it by leaving a comment on the landing page of this walk. And even better, recommend it to a friend by sharing it through your networks. Perhaps you can do it over that hard-earned G&T in honour of Alexander Yersin. As they say in Vietnamese, Hẹn gặp lại, and thank you.